Fear can feel like a fortress, a solid, unyielding structure built to keep us safe. But here's the catch. It's a fortress we often lock ourselves inside. For years, I was trapped in my own mental stronghold, listening to the echo of doubt that fear loves to amplify. It whispered, "Stay put. It's safe here." The problem? Safe wasn't fulfilling. My turning point came during a public speaking event that made my palms sweat and heart race. I wanted to run, but I forced myself to stay. Standing in that spotlight, I realized fear wasn't an enemy. It was a test. Facing it was like tearing down the walls of that fortress brick by brick. Fear doesn't exist to break us. It's there to show us the strength we've always had. The more I challenged it, the more its power waned. The truth is, fear only grows when we avoid it, feeding on our hesitation. When we confront it, we realize it's not as big or as scary as we imagined. What if fear isn't here to control us but to challenge us? What if leaning into it is the key to unlocking the life we're capable of living? Fear and curiosity, two sides of the same coin. As children, we thrived on curiosity, diving headfirst into the unknown without a second thought. Somewhere along the line, fear became the louder voice, convincing us to avoid risks. For me, the shift happened when I started treating fear not as a roadblock, but as a signal. When I was invited to try skydiving, my initial reaction was terror. What if the parachute fails? What if I can't do it? But there was another voice, quieter but persistent, asking, "What if you love it?" That question tipped the scale. On the day of the jump, my stomach churned, but as I leapt, I felt not just exhilaration but clarity. Fear had turned into discovery. This is the paradox. Fear is just curiosity wrapped in discomfort. It's a call to explore, to see what lies on the other side. As adults, we're taught to avoid the unknown, but it's in that space where growth happens. Every time I've leaned into fear, I've walked away with a lesson, a new perspective, or a deeper connection to myself. What would happen if, instead of shrinking back, we chose to step forward? Maybe the real question isn't, why are we afraid? But rather, what could we miss if we let fear win? The biggest lies fear tells us often sound like logic. You're not talented enough. You're too old for this. These whispers kept me caged for years, making me believe that my potential was fixed. One of the clearest memories I have is the first time I thought about running a marathon. My internal monologue kicked in immediately. You're not athletic. You'll embarrass yourself. For a long time, I believed it. Then one day, I decided to stop listening. I took a deep breath, laced up my sneakers, and ran 1 mile. Then 2. The training was brutal, but every step chipped away at the story fear had told me. Crossing the finish line wasn't just a victory over distance. It was a statement to myself. You are stronger than you think. Fear disguises itself as reason, but it's nothing more than a script we've been handed. The moment we question it, the walls start to crack. Every challenge we face has the potential to rewrite our narrative, but it requires a willingness to be uncomfortable. Growth demands it. What self-imposed limits are you living within? What would it take to smash them? Fear doesn't want us to fail. It dares us to rise. The choice is ours. Fear is often misjudged as a roadblock, but what if it's more like a launch pad? For years, I played it safe, letting fear guide me into a comfortable but stagnant existence. It wasn't until I packed up my life and moved to a city where I knew no one that I saw fear for what it truly was, a catalyst. The move terrified me, but staying put scared me even more. Those early days were filled with second-guessing, loneliness, and countless "what am I doing?" moments. But slowly, as I pushed myself to meet people and embrace the unknown, my fear turned into growth. I became more independent, more resilient, and more open to the opportunities that life had to offer. Fear, I realized, isn't there to paralyze us. It's there to prompt action. It asks, are you willing to step into the unknown? The answer, if we're brave enough, often leads to transformation. Every time fear has knocked on my door, it's been followed by some of the most significant leaps of my life. It doesn't just test us, it teaches us what we're capable of. So, what if we stopped seeing fear as a warning sign and started seeing it as a signpost? Maybe it's time to ask ourselves, what would happen if we stopped letting fear dictate our choices? The unknown is where magic happens, but let's face it, it's terrifying. I remember the day I quit my stable job to pursue a dream. It felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing if I'd land safely. Fear screamed, what if you fail? What if you regret this? But here's the thing about fear. It strips away the superficial and forces you to focus on what truly matters. Taking that leap wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights and moments of doubt, but there was also something else: freedom. Freedom to create, to explore, and to live a life that felt authentically mine. The unknown is scary because it's uncharted territory, but it's also where discovery lies. It pushes us to reevaluate what we truly want and to trust that even if we stumble, we'll find our footing. Looking back, I realized that the moments where I stepped into the unknown were the moments that defined me. They weren't without risk, but they were rich with reward. So here's the question: what would you do if fear wasn't in the way? Because the truth is, the unknown isn't a void. It's a canvas waiting for you to paint your masterpiece. Growth rarely comes from a place of comfort. It's messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes downright terrifying. But it's also where transformation happens. I once took on a leadership project that felt far beyond my capabilities. I was flooded with self-doubt. What if I fail? What if I let everyone down? Every step of the way, fear whispered that I wasn't enough. But I kept going, piece by piece, learning as I went. Mistakes? Plenty. But those mistakes became lessons, and those lessons became milestones. By the end, I didn't just finish the project. I became a version of myself I barely recognized, stronger and more capable than I'd ever imagined. The truth about growth is that it demands courage. And courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in spite of it. Every challenge is an opportunity in disguise, whether it's learning a new skill, mending a broken relationship, or stepping into the unknown. The hardest part is starting. That first step feels like a leap, but it's the beginning of something bigger. What's holding you back from leaning into growth? Maybe it's time to find out just how far you can go. After all, the hardest climbs lead to the best views. That here's the truth about fear. It's not some unchangeable monster lurking in the shadows. It's a story we tell ourselves. The good news? Stories can be rewritten. I learned this the hard way during a time when fear dictated my every decision. It told me I wasn't talented enough, smart enough, or deserving enough to chase my goals. I carried those words like baggage, letting them weigh me down. One day, I realized something crucial. Fear wasn't speaking the truth. It was just repeating the same tired script I'd internalized over the years. So, I started rewriting that narrative. I caught myself when those self-defeating thoughts crept in. You can't do this became, what if you succeed? This will fail transformed into this might teach you something amazing. At first, it felt strange, almost dishonest to challenge the fear. But with practice, my inner dialogue shifted. Suddenly, fear became less of a dictator and more of a companion. A voice I could acknowledge but no longer obey. The key was replacing judgment with curiosity. Instead of fearing failure, I got curious about what might happen if I tried. Fear wasn't there to stop me. It was there to teach me. Each time I faced it, I discovered new depths of courage and resilience. And isn't that the point? Fear isn't something to eliminate. It's something to work with. The question is, are you ready to flip the script? What story about fear are you holding on to? And how could you rewrite it into one of courage and possibility? Maybe it's time to pick up the pen and find out.